I absolutely love beat-em-ups. Games like Streets of Rage and TMNT are just amazing, but as a franchise, perhaps the most iconic beat-em-up, it's probably safe to say that it is Double Dragon. I was shocked when Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons was announced and came out this year, you know, kind of came out of nowhere, but I was nevertheless excited. And after playing it, while I acknowledge that it is objectively good, it reminds me of why roguelikes just aren't really for me. But let's talk about it. Hi guys, DPX here reviewing today Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons. Now before we get started, you know what to do. Be sure to like this video, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell, leave a comment, or I will reset you. First of all, the good. The gameplay is very reminiscent of the older Double Dragon games. It feels classic, like if you are playing one of the older Double Dragon games, but also feeling new enough to where it doesn't feel primitive. There are also a lot of characters you can play as. You got the usual Billy and Jimmy, but also Marion and Uncle Mayton. That's not even all, as you unlock many more characters with tokens that you earn throughout the game. I'll have more to say about the actual characters later on, but the variety is really cool, and how you unlock a lot of them gives you an incentive to keep playing. You can also unlock other things throughout the game other than just characters with the tokens, like artwork and music. The tokens can also be used as continues, as I briefly mentioned earlier. Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons is a roguelike. Well, it's not completely a roguelike, but rather it has roguelike elements. Normally, a roguelike is every time you die, you have to start over from the beginning, and the level you just played through is completely different. Double Dragon Gaiden doesn't have the latter part of that, but it does have the former, and I'll talk about how I feel about that later on. But I will say it does add a unique learning curve to the game. There are 4 missions throughout the game, but instead of you just playing all 4 of them, there are multiple levels within each mission that, along with the difficulty of each mission, increases the more you play. That probably sounded a little confusing, but what I mean is you start one mission and it's just one level within the mission, and once you reach the end of the level, you fight the boss of that mission. Then the next mission, there are 2 levels within the mission, and at the end you fight the boss. The third mission has 3, and then the 4th mission also, weirdly enough, has 3 and not 4. But each mission gets progressively more and more difficult, so you have to get used to each level and mission, and think about what mission you think you can do at its highest difficulty. That does add a very unique challenge and an interesting learning curve. As for other things in the game, the music. You simply just cannot go wrong with Double Dragon music, and Modus Games and Arc System Works knew that, making a lot of the music unlockable. And lastly, I know this isn't really about the actual game itself, but whenever a game comes with actual stuff other than just the game, in this case, a bunch of stickers and a poster, it earns bonus points for me. Now on to the mixed. These are things that I'm not sure if they fall under good or bad, so I have them under mixed. One of which is the art style. Now I love that this game is like somewhat pixelated but also somewhat cartoony, but I'm not quite sure how I feel about the chibi art style. You know, I don't hate it and it doesn't look bad, but I'm not sure it's the best fit for Double Dragon. And the other thing is, well, the elephant in the room, for me at least, and that is, I'm not the biggest fan of roguelikes. I have respect for them because it's a very unique type of game, but I can honestly probably count the amount of roguelikes I like on probably one hand. Now, don't get me wrong, I like the idea of dying and coming back to a completely different level, but having to play the game in one beautiful run without dying just never worked for me. It might just be that I'm not built for it, but at a certain point, it starts to just not be fun. And the roguelike element that Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragon took was the one I like less. You know, it does get tough and it does get challenging, and you do want to keep playing in a certain way, but at the same time, it just becomes frustrating. And often when I die, it felt like it was the game being just pure bullshit and not like, you know, I gotta get better. So you might be wondering why I have this under mixed and not under bad, because it is more or less like probably my biggest issue with the game. Well, I acknowledge that this game is objectively good, and it is certainly for a lot of people who jive with roguelikes a lot more. I'm just not one of them. As for the bad, there was one thing that honestly confused me more than frustrated me, and that's the load times. The load times are honestly ridiculous, and I don't really understand why. Keep in mind, I played this on the Switch, so I'm playing a 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up on a cartridge in the year 2023. I do not understand why Double Dragon, of all games, sometimes takes over half a goddamn minute to load. That's one issue I have with the game. And the other is that while I do like the cast of characters, I mostly defaulted to Billy and Jimmy, or Bimmy and Jimmy, as some people like to call them, because some of the characters are just not as good. I don't really know what it is, but every time I selected Marion and Uncle Maiden, or Matin, I would get my ass handed to me. To be fair, once again, I could just be bad at this game, but at a certain point, I just stuck with Billy and Jimmy and even forgot that there were other characters to play as.
Lucky me.
Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons is not a bad game, not by any means. I mean, you can tell a lot of love and care was put into this game, and it seems like a game for Double Dragon fans. But your enjoyment of the game depends on a few things. One of those things is, are you a Double Dragon fan, or by extension, a fan of old school beat-em-ups? And the other thing being, do you like roguelikes? If you said yes to both of those, I can definitely recommend this game to you. But if you said no to either one of them, I'm not sure you'll get a kick out of it. I love 2D old school side-scrolling beat-em-ups, but if you're a newcomer to the genre, or to Double Dragon, the roguelike elements might turn you off, unless you, of course, like roguelikes. But as for me, someone who likes beat-em-ups, but not really roguelikes, it was a bit difficult for me to have a good time with this game. I didn't hate it, but like I said earlier, it further reminds me why roguelikes just aren't for me. That being said, I'm going to give Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons a 7 out of 10. So yeah, that was my review for Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons. I still think that's a really dumb title, but I really wanted to love this game, and I did really love certain aspects of it, but man, roguelikes just are not for me. I'm sure you're sick of hearing me say that, but I was gonna see, maybe the beat 'em up aspects might outdo the roguelike aspects, but I don't know, man, just didn't click with me. But what do you guys think? Because I definitely feel like this is a game where, I didn't love, but I'm sure a lot of other people out there will love it. So if this game seems to be up your alley, go get it. Anyways, that's my review for Double Dragon Gaiden Rise of the Dragons. What do you guys think? Be sure to like the video, come subscribe, or I will reset you. Bye!